Thanks for coming back with the last part of our conversation with Sacha. And Sacha, during that break, we're just having a chat with the crew. And what was some of the feedback you were hearing from the guys?
Well, just talking about delivery ward trauma, where men who go into the labour ward and see their child born and then come out and have trouble seeing their wives in a sexual way. And it sounds like that is definitely occurring. Yeah.
And I wonder how much of this isn't actually spoken about. And I wonder also, you know, we wanted to get on to the subject about dads feeling a bit of jealousy. So if they've got a bit of a trauma about seeing their wife give birth, then they're ignored, and then the jealousy comes up. Can you just share more around for couples to start talking?
I think that's crucial, you know. To communicate is really, really important, and I would say every one of us has difficulties in communicating it sometimes. You know, and I know that my partner, my wife and I, you know, we sometimes you let little things sort of build up, little frustrations, and childbirth can really bring that out, because after a child is born, you become tired, you become harried, you don't really know what you're doing, you're sort of floundering for a little while. Well, certainly that's how I felt, and I think it's how many new parents do. And there's the readjustment of the relationship where there were two of you, now there's a baby. So it's a matter of the mum and the dad just working out where they stand again in relation to each other, in relation to this new being. Your roles within the family have changed because your family's changed. There are three of you where there were two. And
so it's redefining the roles and actually having a conversation around it.
And you don't, I mean, you know this in a philosophical, theoretical way before. I mean, obviously you're going to come home from hospital with three of you, but the reality of that you can't really comprehend, I think. You know, I certainly couldn't. And so you come home, and over time, as your roles are readjusting, well, for me, I did find there were times when I started to feel jealous. I guess that's the only word I can use. As much as I loved Edie, you know, every minute, you know, in every way, and wouldn't have changed a thing at any time, despite the 4 a.m. pacing the hallway, trying to get her to stop crying, and despite these pangs of jealousy, whatever it may be. But yeah, there were definitely moments where I mourned the fact that the relationship I had with my wife was not what we had anymore. You know, and as I was saying, we had a sabbatical overseas in France before we came back to Australia, and Jo was pregnant, and then we had Edie. So there was that real stark contrast of this time overseas where it was just the two of us. We weren't working. We were having really a charmed life for a few months, and then the reality of going back to work, having a baby, and then finding, you know, you don't have that same. Your wife might not have the same time that she had. Well, she won't as she had for you. You don't have the same time for her, because a lot of your energies are now going to taking care of this newborn, you know, who is the centre of your life, and you don't really know what you're doing, so you're sort of struggling. And yeah, it's a big readjustment.
Okay, well, let's ask you about your personal experience of jealousy. What were you feeling? What were you thinking? Let's go into that a bit, because, you know, if there's a lot of men out there feeling this, then it's probably going to help them to know how to handle it and save marriages.
Yeah, I guess, you know, putting a word like jealousy on it is kind of in some ways almost oversimplifying it, because there are so many things going on in your head. You're tired for a start, so you become a bit more irrational. You're in love with this new being, hopefully. You know, different men and women have different bonding experiences with their kids. And just to go into mine there, I guess I had a tremendous bonding moment in the labour ward, and, you know, that was lovely. But I don't think, have the same outpouring of love as Jo had. And when Edie was put on her chest, and they had an instant, you know, lightning bolt bond, whereas I had that to a certain degree, but mine was more, I guess, of a traditional bloke's way, where it grew more over time. It was a bond that sort of strengthened as Edie grew up, and I really felt that. Maybe when around about the time she turned one, it suddenly turned a corner, and I was like, I'm really loving being a dad. It feels much more comfortable now. I feel like I've kind of made it here, I'm okay. But yeah, wrapped up in that and more was this, which a feeling I can only describe as jealousy, where where it's that Edie is getting this attention that should rightfully be mine, you know. She should have, you know, I should be getting more of my wife's love and attention, you know, nurturing and all that sort of stuff. You know, at one point, it did seem like that bond between Joe and Edie is almost, you could describe as erotic, because it's so physical and so intense, you know, and so you just feel a bit left out.
Okay, so then how did you handle those moments when you had those feelings and those thoughts? What did you do?
Well, in my case, it was never so serious. This is just something that is part of the rich tapestry of becoming a dad, I guess, you know, and you have your ups and downs, and they're exacerbated by the fact that you're tired and you're feeling out of your depth at times. And I was lucky enough that that things never really got very bad for a long time, or, you know, they were just little troughs where for half a day I'd feel a little bit, you know, sad, or you know, I never got to the point where I burst into tears or anything like that. But, you know, I remember an afternoon where I felt a bit teary, or, you know, so it's nothing dramatic. They're just kind of the highs and lows, and there were so many times where I just felt ecstatic and happy, you know. I mean, ultimately what I hope comes out in the book is that my experience of becoming a dad has just been absolutely overwhelmingly positive, extremely challenging at times, but I wouldn't change a thing. And part of it is, I think, that my relationship with my wife has become richer and, you know, more layered, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty clear from reading the book, and also, you know, hearing your thoughts today. I guess, though, part of me, after hearing what two of our male crew said, and some of your experiences, part of me then wants to sort of follow this track down here, because we're talking at one stage about this is a book that could save marriages.
Oh, well, that would be great. And look, as I mentioned also, it's I just want the role of fatherhood. That would be a great aim for me, a great achievement, if fatherhood is discussed a little bit more and we start thinking about what it is fathers do and should be doing. And if it saves marriages, I mean, that would be absolutely fantastic, of course. But one of the particular conditions that I hope people become aware of when they read the book, or out of discussions that arise from the book, is postnatal depression in men, which a lot of people don't know about. I had no idea existed before I started researching the book. And apparently it afflicts about 4% of dads, which is quite a significant number. I mean, postnatal depression for women is tremendously significant. Apparently it's about 15% of mums who are affected. So, you know, that's the big picture. That's a serious statistic. But it does also exist for men. And often it happens in tandem, where one partner is depressed. There's often a kind of contagion there where that partner is not coping, therefore it's so much harder for the other partner, and then the other partner can get depressed as well. And I think just the fact that people know about the fact that postnatal depression can exist in men would make it more likely for someone, a dad who isn't coping, to talk about it. And just by talking about it, that makes it more likely that the problem can be addressed and treated, because it's something that's treatable.
Okay, and how important is intimacy for a couple? Which is probably like a stupid question on one level, but it seems also that if a new dad is feeling a little jealous and ignored, and may have some postnatal depression happening, surely, if they're able to talk about it and the sooner they can get back to that intimacy, that's got to stop a whole bunch of problems from enlarging down the track. Can you just share on that one?
It does. Well, look, the male tendency is often, I do this all the time, that when you're confronted and you're feeling like you're not getting what you would like to be getting and think you deserve, you know, whether, you know, whatever aspect of your relationship that is, you know, then you can get a bit resentful and retreat into yourself, and that can be a bit of a trap, because then you become less communicative, and, you know, things can get a bit more difficult.
They keep escalating.
Yeah, they just, you know, and look, that's not just a bloke thing. That can happen on both sides.
Sure.
You know, where you think that the other partner isn't pulling their weight. You know, and this is something else that I talk about, because you asked me before, what would I say to people about to become dads? be aware that it can be very challenging, but I would say, look, the biggest thing you can do, in my experience and talking to people, to give yourself the best chance of having a good experience is just to muck in as much as you can. Don't get resentful and withdraw from the relationship and, get a little bit bitter or anything like that. Get involved, get your hands dirty, That's with changing the nappies and doing all the baby rearing tasks, but also on the other hand, the housework. There are, I think, the statistics bear out that men generally are mucking in a lot more than they used to. They're much more hands-on with raising kids, and they get more involved with housework too. But it's still it's still very unequal. Women still do the lion's share of the child raising for, in some cases, obvious reasons, early on with the breastfeeding, etc. But also with the housework. I think there are men, and this is the traditional way, a lot of men who go to work. They're the go-to-work dads, and that's the stay-at-home mum. There are still, lots of households like that. Our household was like that. I was lucky enough that I could do a lot of my work at home, but it was still kind of had that division early on. And I think that in some cases those men can think, look, I'm going to work, I'm earning the money, I'm supporting this family. I have the right to come home and just watch telly and relax at night because I'm stressed from my day. But the reality is when you have a new baby, that's not how it should be, because what that means then is that the mum who's been working all day too, just doing a different sort of work, keeping the house in order.
Not valued, perhaps.
Not valued as much, not raising money, raising a child. And having tried both, I've taken a bit of paternity leave and been the primary caregiver for a period of Edie. I know which one's easier. Looking after the baby and keeping the house in order is much more of a challenge than working full-time at the Sydney Morning Herald.
And doing the social bit, because that's what we do when we go to work. We're also socialising.
That's right. It's a real outlet. And I think, there are plenty of dads, for understandable reasons, who use their work as an escape and then work longer hours because it's more fun and easier to be at work than it is to be at home. So I think, look, my big overriding piece of advice, and it's not an advice book, but I guess from my experience what I would say is get in there and muck in as a new dad, and that, to me, will give you the best chance of having your relationship be well, of having not having intimacy issues, not having jealousy issues, all these sorts of things. I think you have the best chance of avoiding those sorts of things if, as a dad, you get busy.
We're just about finished, but I do know some of the articles and research I've read over the years that women find it totally romantic when their husbands do things like bring the clothes off the line, wash up, and all of a sudden they feel so supported, they open up their hearts, and it actually brings in intimacy. So,
vacuuming becomes foreplay.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Sacha, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thanks for having me, Robyn.
It's certainly a very interesting book. It's got lots of research figures. It's also got some really funny articles and also some very sensitive information in there about all the joys and some of the challenge of being a dad. The website, www.conversationswithrobyn.com. You can go into, because it's now a new revised website, into guests and topics, and you'll see a link to Sacha. Also, there's now an opportunity to download some of our programs. Until next time, take care.